The cold fluorescent light spilled down over the checkout counter. A muffled sob broke the false silence of Hale's FreshMart. Emily Ward, just 27, tried to hold back her tears while her hands moved products across the scanner. But no one asked, no one cared. She was only a shadow in the flow of indifferent customers. At the end of the aisle, a middle-aged man stood still. His jacket was worn at the shoulders, his cap pulled low to hide half his face. To the staff, he was just another drifter stopping in to shop. No one knew he was Richard Hale, 52 years old, the founder of this entire supermarket empire. His name was on the sign above the door, on every receipt. Yet today, not a soul recognized him. And perhaps that anonymity was what allowed him to see the truth that financial reports could never reveal. Richard held his breath as he watched Emily. Her forced smile, her trembling voice, her hands so thin and dry that even passing a receipt made them shake. For a moment, she wiped away a tear with the sleeve of her worn shirt. His chest tightened. He had once believed that people are the heart of a business. Yet here, in the very house he had built, that heart was breaking apart. "Ward!" The shout struck like a hammer. From the manager's office stormed Travis Cole, 38, heavy-set, his face flushed with anger. He slammed a clipboard down on the counter. "Crying again? How many times have I said it? If you can't keep your composure, you're done. Don't be surprised if your shifts disappear next week." Emily swallowed hard, whispered through tears, "I'm sorry, I'll be fine." No one defended her. No one spoke. Other employees pretended to be busy. Customers stayed silent. The heavy quiet was complicit. In the shadows of the aisle, Richard's fist clenched. He knew this was no strict management. This was raw intimidation, and it was happening inside the very place that bore his name. In that moment, memories flooded back. Years ago, Richard had hauled crates of potatoes, scrubbed greasy floors just to make enough for the first store to survive. He had sworn no employee of his would ever be treated with the same contempt he once endured. Yet now Emily, a single mother struggling to survive, was being crushed by the very system he had built. Travis turned and walked back into his office, leaving the air thick with dread. Emily kept scanning items, her lips repeating "thank you" like a machine, her hands trembling as she passed each receipt. Richard's chest ached as he watched. This was not just a young woman in tears. This was an indictment of the entire system he once took pride in. He knew his act as a silent customer would have to end soon. But not yet. Richard Hale drew a deep breath, his eyes burning with resolve. Tomorrow he would return, not as an anonymous shopper, but as an ordinary new hire. He needed to expose the truth from within, and then the store would face its greatest shock. The man dismissed today as insignificant was the very one with the power to change the fate of them all. The next morning, sunlight stretched across the parking lot of Hale's FreshMart. A new figure appeared at the back entrance of the store, faded jeans, a cheap shirt, a temporary name tag pinned to his chest that read Rick Trainee. Gone was the powerful presence that commanded boardroom meetings. Richard Hale walked in as a nobody. No one noticed. No one greeted him. Everyone passed by as if he were a shadow. His heart pounded, filled with both pain and resolve. This was the real distance between polished reports and the harsh reality on the store floor. "Hey, rookie." A voice came from the cereal aisle. A thin young man, maybe 22, thick glasses, messy hair, was stacking boxes onto the shelf. "Name's Mark Jensen. Don't wonder why people here don't talk much. The less you talk, the fewer problems you have." Richard offered a faint smile. "How long have you been here?" "Almost 2 years." Mark lowered his voice, glancing around before continuing. "But it's never been this heavy before. Travis cuts shifts, changes schedules without reason. Anyone with kids, anyone who asks for sick leave, they lose hours. The ones who keep quiet get more shifts. Each word pierced Richard like a needle. He nodded, pretending to straighten a box of noodles. "And Emily?" Mark's hand stopped. His eyes darkened. "She's the best worker here. But since she took time off to rush her son to the ER for an asthma attack, Travis has been trying to erase her schedule. She's down to just 15 hours a week. Enough for rent? No. Enough to support a sick child? Not even close." Richard's chest tightened. That number, 15 hours, was something he himself had once approved on a staffing report. Back then he thought of it simply as cost optimization. Now that number looked like a noose strangling a family. That afternoon, near the end of his shift, Richard found a way to slip toward the manager's office. The door was slightly ajar, a blue glow from a computer screen spilling out. He sat at the desk while Travis had stepped out to check inventory. Hands trembling but eyes sharp, Richard logged in with an emergency technician's account, a master key he had always kept hidden as a safeguard. The screen filled with scheduling data from the last 3 months. He typed, "Emily Ward." The chart of her hours dropped straight down, from 32 to 24, then 15, and this week, just 9. He searched further. Mark Jensen, Linda, Jorge. Every weary face he had seen that morning showed the same pattern. Hours slashed, red notes reading, "Not priority, not reliable." Meanwhile, Travis's inner circle gained steady hours, stable pay. Richard clenched his teeth. This was no suspicion. This was naked truth. Travis had turned the schedule, meant to be a tool of fairness, into a weapon to exploit employees. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Richard quickly exited the system and pretended to be wiping down the desk. The door swung open. Travis entered, suspicion burning in his eyes. "What are you doing in here?" Richard looked up, voice calm. "I heard about Emily's hours being cut. I wanted to know if it was true." A smug smile spread across Travis's face. "True, and it will keep happening. This is a business, not a charity. I need people who obey, not some single mother crying all the time." Richard said nothing, but inside, fury burned like fire. He knew the game was about to end. Tomorrow, Travis would no longer hold the keys to this office. The next morning, pale golden sunlight streamed through the front windows of Hale's FreshMart. Inside, the air was as heavy as always. Customers moving quietly, employees working without spirit. But everything shifted when a new figure stepped in. No longer the faded jacket, no longer the trainee's name tag. Today he wore a sharp gray suit, a light blue tie, and pinned to his chest, gleaming in the light, was a badge that read, "Richard Hale, CEO." The sound of leather shoes struck the cold tile floor, each step slow but carrying weight. Employees looked up, stunned. A few gasped, whispering, "It's him. It's the owner." At checkout lane 4, Emily froze mid-scan. Her heart seemed to stop. The man who had quietly helped stack groceries days before was the founder himself. At the service desk, Travis Cole bent over the schedule book, a coffee cup in hand. He had not even looked up when a shadow fell across his desk. A deep voice, resonant and cold as steel, broke the air. "Good morning." Travis frowned. "You are." Richard calmly lifted the badge from his coat and set it down hard on the desk. The glint of metal seemed to flash across the room. "Richard Hale, founder. The man who has seen and heard everything." The air froze solid. Even the beep of the checkout scanners fell silent. Every pair of eyes turned toward the service counter. Travis let out a weak laugh. his voice cracking. "There must be some mistake. I was only trying to keep the store running." Richard cut him off, his tone like iron. "By cutting hours from a mother whose son suffered an asthma attack? By turning the schedule into a weapon of intimidation?" Travis staggered back, face drained of blood. He glanced around, searching for an ally, but everyone stood still. No one moved. No one spoke in his defense. "You call this cost optimization?" Richard stepped forward, his words short and heavy, like hammers striking. "No, this is optimizing fear, exploitation, and from this day forward, it ends." In an instant, every eye in the store followed Richard's hand as he extended it. "The keys." Travis froze. A few seconds ticked by, taut as a drawn bowstring. Then, with trembling fingers, he pulled the ring of keys from his pocket and placed it into Richard's palm. "You're making a mistake," he muttered, lips quivering. Richard's gaze locked into his, sharp and cutting straight through. "The only mistake was allowing you to exist in this system for far too long." Travis swallowed hard, then quietly stepped back. No longer a man of authority, no longer barking orders. Only a broken figure with his head lowered, walking out of the supermarket under the watch of dozens of eyes. The door closed behind him, and for the first time in months, the atmosphere inside the store shifted. No longer suffocating, but filled with a mixture of anticipation, fear, and hope. Richard turned, his eyes sweeping over the faces of employees, people who had endured far too much. He drew in a deep breath, his voice resounding across the aisles. 10 minutes from now, meet me in the break room, all of you." No one objected. No one hesitated. As if by instinct, they set their tasks aside. They knew a new chapter was opening. And it began in that very moment. The break room of Hale's FreshMart had never been so crowded. There weren't enough chairs. Some leaned against the wall. Others folded their arms tight across their chests, their eyes carrying both doubt and fragile hope. There was no nervous laughter, no muttered complaints. The air was thick, as if everyone held their breath waiting for a verdict. At the front, Richard Hale stood tall. No podium, no microphone. Just a man of flesh and blood facing a room full of weary faces. He let a few seconds of silence pass, then spoke, his voice deep yet clear, each word ringing with weight. "I am the founder of Hale's FreshMart, and I have failed in the most important thing of all, protecting you from injustice." The room seemed to freeze. A few eyes glistened. Mark looked down, his hands clenching tight. Emily sat in the corner, her arms wrapped around herself as if she wanted to disappear. Richard continued, his tone slow, heavy with meaning. "I have listened, I have seen, and I believe you. This is not about a few shifts or a clean report. This is about livelihoods. This is about dignity. And from this day forward, everything changes." Murmurs rose. An older employee, his hair streaked with gray, whispered, "Can this really be true?" Richard did not look away. His eyes sought out Emily. They stopped on her, the dark circles under her eyes, her hands clutching the hem of her shirt, still trembling with fear. He called softly, yet loud enough for all to hear. "Emily." The room turned to her. Emily startled, jumping to her feet as if she had done something wrong. I'm sorry, Richard stepped forward, his voice firm. "No apologies. I want to ask you, are you willing to help me change this place?" The room cracked open like a clap of thunder. Emily blinked, confused, stammering. I'm just a cashier. I've been labeled as unreliable." I even cried in front of customers." Richard smiled, warm but sharp. "And yet you kept going. You kept working. You still respected the customers. You still protected your coworkers. The title I give you today only confirms what you have already proven long ago." Emily's throat tightened. Her eyes shimmered, her lips pressed together. "Emily Ward," Richard's voice rang. "From this day, I appoint you assistant manager of this store, with full authority and trust." A hush swept the room. Then skeptical glances shifted to surprise. Surprise turned into whispers. A few employees nodded, their eyes lighting up. Emily clutched her hands to her chest, whispering so faint it was almost lost. "If you believe in me, I will try." Richard placed his hand firmly on her shoulder. "Don't try. You already have. Now just continue." Behind them, Mark exhaled, his thin shoulders easing. A woman wiped her tears. The air in the room shifted like a door had opened to let in a new wind. Richard turned back to the room, his voice strong. "This is not only Emily's fight. This is all of ours. If anyone here still believes Hale's FreshMart can be a place worth working for, then join me in starting over beginning today." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then rolling louder. It was not cheering, it was not shouting. It was the sigh of relief from people who, at last, were being heard. The office door clicked shut behind Emily with a soft snap. For the first time, she stepped into the room that for months had been nothing but a source of dread. Travis's office. The air still carried the stale scent of old coffee mixed with the acrid trace of sweat and tension. On the desk, the worn swivel chair with its cracked leather still seemed to hold the arrogant posture of the manager who had been stripped of his keys. Emily stood still for a few seconds, her palms damp. The room was small, but it felt like it was filled with mountains of secrets. She drew a deep breath and sat down. The keyboard clattered beneath her trembling fingers. The screen lit up, the schedule appearing before her. One glance, and her heart sank. Linda night shifts from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights straight. Jorge off at 10 p.m., back by 7 a.m. the next morning. Cassie no shifts at all, a red note beside her name. Requested time off for child troublemaker. Emily pressed her lips together, scrolling further. Line after line of cruel, unreasonable schedules. It wasn't just her hours being cut, the entire team had been strangled in silence. Each entry was like a knife slashing deeper into the dignity of these people. She opened a drawer. Inside was a worn notebook scribbled with red notes. "Cut Linda's hours, complains too much. Cassie, nuisance. Jorge doesn't deserve prime shifts." Emily shut the book, her shoulders shaking. She understood now. Travis hadn't just targeted her. He had turned the schedule itself into a weapon of control. Her eyes burned, but this time no tears fell. Instead, a fire rose within her. Emily turned back to the screen and opened a new page. Slowly, firmly, she typed the first line. Scheduling principle. To support, not to punish. The sound of the keys echoed in the room like hammers breaking old chains. Priority for single mothers. Stable morning shifts. Limit consecutive night shifts. No more than 3. Anyone with children, school, or medical needs must be given advance adjustment. Final note. Anyone with concerns, come directly to me. My door is always open. Emily paused, her hand resting on the keyboard. In that moment, she was no longer the trembling cashier at checkout lane 4, but the one rebuilding the heartbeat of the store. Outside the window, the midday sun poured across the floor through the dusty glass. She saw Linda arranging fruit, her head lifted for the first time. Jorge pushing a cart with a soft whistle on his lips. These small movements, Emily realized, were the very seeds of life that needed care. She sat tall, saved the new schedule, then placed a handwritten note on the monitor. No one will cry out of fear of losing their job again. In that moment, she knew her responsibility was no longer just to support her son, but to lift the entire team out of the shadow Travis had left behind. And deep inside her, a whisper rose. Tomorrow, they will see the difference. Tomorrow, we begin again. 5 minutes before the end of the shift, an internal message lit up on the computer screens. All staff meeting in the break room. No signature, just a single line. But everyone knew this was the first meeting since Travis had been removed. The break room, already small, was packed tight. Plastic chairs filled quickly. Some leaned against the wall. Some folded their arms, their eyes carrying both doubt and exhaustion. There was no laughter, no complaining. Only a heavy silence, like a storm waiting to break. The door opened. Emily stepped in. She still wore the same uniform, her hair still hastily tied back, but her posture had changed. In her hands were no clipboards like Travis used to wield, only a few sheets of new schedules. For a moment, every eye turned to her. Emily swallowed hard, her palms damp with sweat. She knew this was the moment that mattered. Her voice shook on the first words, but it carried across the room. Everyone, I know these past weeks have been hell, and I need to say one thing. I'm sorry. The room murmured. Mark looked up. Linda frowned. Emily drew in a deep breath, her voice growing clearer, firmer. I stayed silent. I thought keeping my head down meant safety. I thought if I just endured, the storm would pass. But that silence only gave Travis more power. I was wrong, and I am sorry I did not stand with you sooner. The space went still. Linda clenched her hands, her eyes shining with emotion. A young employee gave a small nod. Emily looked around, meeting every gaze. But starting today, everything changes. I have rewritten the entire schedule. No one will have to choose between work and their children, or endless night shifts and their health. If there is a problem, my door is always open, and if I fail, you have every right to go directly to Mr. Richard Hale. The mention of the CEO's name sent a ripple through the room. A few people exchanged looks, as if to confirm this was no joke. Emily continued, her voice now stronger, each word cutting through fear. We no longer have to tremble at a clipboard or a glare. This is a workplace, not a prison. From now on, we stand together to make Hale's FreshMart a place worth coming to every day. The silence was heavy. Then, from the corner, Mark gave a small nod, his eyes wet but bright. Linda wiped at her face, whispering, That's right. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then spreading, until it filled the room in steady waves. Not cheering, not shouting, just the sound of relief transformed into rhythm, the sound of a team shaking off its chains. Emily stood there, her chest rising and falling, her hands still trembling. But on her lips was the first genuine smile she had shown in months. Small, but real. From the corner, Richard watched quietly. He said nothing. He knew this moment no longer needed him. This was Emily's moment, and the moment of a team that had just reclaimed its voice. The meeting ended and groups of employees quietly filed out of the break room. No one laughed loudly, no one rushed back to their posts, but on their faces there was something new, a lightness in their eyes, like after a storm when people take their first breath of clear air. Emily remained near the door, holding the stack of new schedules. Her eyes moved through the crowd, searching for one face. Then she saw him, Mark Jensen, thin frame, slightly hunched shoulders, pushing a heavy box toward the storeroom. "Mark," she called softly. He stopped, looked up, surprise mixed with a flicker of fear. "Yes? What is it?" Emily stepped closer, her voice gentle. "I saw you today helping Linda train the new staff. You did a good job." Mark gave an awkward smile, scratching the back of his head. "Well, not really. I'm not good at talking to people. I just didn't want Linda to handle it alone." Emily met his eyes, the eyes that had grown used to avoiding contact. "Travis used to mark you down as not suited for customers, didn't he?" Mark nodded, his smile twisting bitterly. "He said I was clumsy, didn't know how to talk, would only irritate customers. So I stayed in the back, stacking shelves. Less interaction, less trouble." Emily sighed softly. Travis was wrong. Mark's brow furrowed, as if he hadn't heard her right. Emily went on, her voice steady and sure. "I saw how you speak with your coworkers. Calm, honest, patient. That is exactly what customers need. I want you to try working at the counter, face to face with them. I'll be there with you." Mark's eyes widened, startled. "Me? But what if I mess it up?" Emily cut him off, her gaze bright and unwavering. "You've been standing in the shadows too long, Mark. You deserve to be out front. Don't let Travis's words keep you chained any longer." In that moment, Mark's face shifted. Fear was still there, but deep in his eyes a spark of belief flickered back to life. He hesitated, then nodded faintly. If you believe in me, I'll try." Emily smiled, a rare but determined smile. "Not try, Mark. You will. Tomorrow, I want you at the checkout with me." Mark froze, then slowly nodded again. Not the nod of someone reluctant, but the nod of someone who once thought himself invisible, now called by name. From a distance, Richard Hale watched it all. He saw the tremble in Mark's hands, but he also saw those thin shoulders slowly straighten. Warmth rose in Richard's chest. This was exactly what he hoped for. When trust is restored, those once dismissed as extras become pillars. Emily turned away, her heart pounding. For the first time, she realized true power was not in the assistant manager badge on her chest, but in the ability to lift another person to their feet. Just a few days after the decisive meeting, Hale's FreshMart was already different. Not a miraculous transformation, but a fresh breeze beginning to weave its way through. Small details, once overlooked, now stood as the clearest signs of change. At the produce counter, Linda, the woman who once silently endured 5 consecutive night shifts, was now arranging baskets of shiny red apples under the lights. On her lips, she softly hummed along to the music playing through the store's speakers. The tune was faint, but it made passing customers smile. In the frozen foods aisle, Mark stood tall, his uniform neat. An elderly woman struggled with a trembling shopping list in her hands. Mark stepped forward, his voice gentle yet confident. "May I help you find this item?" The old woman's eyes lit with surprise. "It's been so long since someone asked me that." Mark bowed slightly and guided her to the right shelf. In that moment, the young man who once hid behind crates finally found his true place, where gratitude shone in the eyes of a customer. At checkout lane 4, Emily leaned down and handed a little girl a sticker shaped like a teddy bear. The child clutched it and stopped fussing. The young mother looked at Emily, eyes glistening with tears but smiling in gratitude. Emily nodded softly, her heart trembling. For the first time, this job was no longer just survival, but a chance to touch another person's heart. The whole store seemed brighter, not the lights, but the atmosphere. The words, "thank you," carried warmth now, no longer forced. Shoulders no longer slumped, but stood straight with confidence. At the end of the aisle, Richard Hale quietly observed. He wore a simple shirt, no CEO badge, just another ordinary customer. But in his eyes, joy swelled. He saw Linda smiling softly, saw Mark bowing to a customer, saw Emily walking the aisles with lighter steps. Richard needed no pen or paper to take notes. The clearest evidence was not on a report, it was in the eyes, the smiles, the way feet met the floor. A middle-aged customer turned to his wife and whispered, "I don't know why, but this store feels different lately. The staff are kinder, the atmosphere is better." The wife nodded. "Yes, it feels like they truly care." Richard stood still, a quiet smile brushing across his face. He did not need recognition. What he wanted was already there, the rebirth of a family once crushed by fear. As he left the store, Richard paused and looked back. The sign of Hale's FreshMart glistened under the afternoon sun. He drew a deep breath. How long had it been since he felt proud of that name? He knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead was long, with many turns. But with these changes, Richard believed, the roots had been saved, and from those roots, the entire tree would rise. A week passed. On a gentle, sunny afternoon, Richard Hale returned to Hale's FreshMart. No entourage, no announcement. Just a middle-aged man in a light blue shirt with a thin jacket draped over his shoulders, walking into the store like any other customer. The scene before him tightened his chest, not with pain this time, but with the weight of change. The aisles were bright, the shelves neatly arranged. More importantly, the atmosphere was no longer heavy. Voices of greetings, quiet laughter, and a liveliness spread through the air. Mark, the young man who once hid in the stockroom, was now helping an elderly woman lift her bags onto her cart. He smiled awkwardly, but sincerely. "Let me help you. This cart is a little heavy." The woman clasped his hand and nodded in thanks. Richard paused for a moment, warmth rising in his chest. At checkout lane 3, Linda was chatting with a regular customer. The gentle smile on her face was something no one had seen for a long time. She scanned items while sharing small stories, the customer nodding along. Richard thought quietly, all it takes is a fair environment and people will bloom on their own. And then, at lane 4, the place where Emily had once broken down in tears, now rang with the laughter of a child. Emily handed a little girl a sticker shaped like a rabbit. The young mother smiled, her eyes full of gratitude. Emily stood tall, her face radiant, no longer marked by the fear of the past. Richard slowed his steps. Emily looked up, and their eyes met. She froze briefly, then offered a small smile and bowed her head. He walked closer, his voice low but gentle. "I never thought I'd see the store like this so quickly." Emily lowered her gaze, shy. "I'm just trying to do what's right. There are still days I'm afraid I'm not enough, moments I think I'll fall." Richard studied her for a long moment, then spoke firmly. "But you didn't fall. What matters most is that you kept standing. Emily, I didn't give you this chance. You earned it, every day, by refusing to give up." Emily's eyes shimmered. She whispered, her voice trembling, "I used to think I was just a replaceable part, someone anyone could leave behind at any time." Richard shook his head, his eyes steady and deep. "No, you are the reason I believe Hale's FreshMart is still worth saving. You reminded me that the value of this brand was never in the numbers, but in the people." For a moment, all other sounds faded away. Only two people remained, a founder who had once lost his vision and an employee who had once thought herself invisible, now standing together in understanding. Emily lowered her head, a small but steady smile on her lips. "Thank you for seeing me." Richard gave a faint nod. He knew no further words were needed. Change had begun, and Emily was now the heartbeat of this store. Sunset spilled through the frosted glass of the manager's office. The room that had once echoed with Travis's shouting was now quiet, filled only with the sound of keystrokes and Emily's steady breathing. On the desk, the new schedule had already been saved, but she knew true change required something more, something permanent, a promise that anyone who walked into this office would see. She tore a large sheet of paper and taped it above the computer screen. Pen in hand, Emily paused for a moment. Her heart raced, but her hand was steady. The first line appeared in bold strokes. "The schedule exists to support, not to punish." Her eyes fixed on the words. Each one felt like cutting through the old chains. She wrote more. "Always listen first, adjust after. Every shift is a piece of someone's life. Treat it with respect. No one should ever cry in fear of losing their job. Good people do not need control, they need trust." The pen trembled slightly, but when she placed the final period, it was as though a weight had been lifted. Emily stepped back and looked at the paper on the wall. The lines were bold, simple, but they carried every tear and all the strength she had gathered. In the reflection of the window, her face still showed fatigue, dark circles under her eyes. But she was no longer the trembling woman at checkout lane 4. In her gaze now was resolve and the light of a leader. Outside, the staff finished the evening shift. Mark patiently showed a new hire how to check inventory, so patient that the young man nodded in admiration. Linda folded her apron neatly, smiling as she said goodbye to her co-workers. Gentle laughter drifted through the hallways, the kind of sound the store had been missing for too long. Emily opened the door and stepped out, the golden glow of the ceiling light falling across her shoulders. She looked around and saw her co-workers packing up, no longer with bowed heads of resignation, but with straight gazes and faint smiles. She exhaled softly, knowing change had begun to take root. Later that night, as the store closed, Emily turned off the light at checkout lane 4, the very place that had once seen her tears. She stood still for a moment, gazing at the empty space, then smiled, not because of her new title, but because she had kept her promise to herself. No one would have to fight alone again. Outside, the night sky spread across the city. Emily walked to the parking lot, her wallet no longer empty, her hand no longer trembling as she filled her tank. In the rearview mirror, she saw her young son fast asleep, his face peaceful. A smile spread across her lips, quiet but proud. Somewhere, Richard Hale was surely still watching, but now he no longer needed to step in, because Emily and the entire team had found the strength to write the next chapter for Hale's FreshMart. In the world of business, many believe that the strength of a brand lies in revenue, in the number of branches opened, or in polished reports presented in boardrooms. But the story of Hale's FreshMart revealed a deeper truth. The soul of a business is not drawn on a chart. It lives in the hearts of the people working at the counters, in the stockroom, or behind the register. Richard Hale had once lost sight of that. He became consumed by numbers, trusting in reports of cost optimization, until he witnessed firsthand Emily, a young mother, breaking down in tears inside the very store that bore his name. That shock forced him to confront the question: what had he built, and what was he losing? Yet the hopeful truth is this: it is never too late to change. The ending we witnessed was no miracle. It came from small but courageous acts: Emily daring to lift her head after too many tears, Mark stepping out to the front after hiding in the stockroom, Linda allowing her smile to return after months of exhaustion. And above all, a leader willing to remove the CEO's badge in order to truly listen to the pain within his store. This is the greatest lesson for everyone watching. True leadership is not measured by power, but by the ability to see, to listen, and to give trust at the right moment. Imagine if every business chose a more human path. How many Emilys would no longer have to cry at checkout lane 4? How many Marks would find their rightful place? How many customers would be greeted with genuine smiles as they walked through the doors? That is the power of kindness, something that cannot be measured by short-term profit, but the very thing that allows a business to stand strong in the long run. If this story made you pause to reflect on the work you do, the place you belong to, or the way you treat those around you, leave us a small sign to let us know. Because sometimes, changing a vast system begins with a single small mark. And don't forget, hit like if you believe compassion is the strongest foundation any business can have. Subscribe to join us for more undercover stories filled with drama, yet grounded in humanity. And finally, leave a comment with just 3 words. Give trust, a reminder to us all that no one is truly invisible if someone dares to believe in them. Every click you make is not only support for this channel, but also a way to spread the message that while work may drain energy, it must never strip away human dignity.